Welcome to your daily dose of theological German, where a sentence a day keeps the dissertation detractors away. We are on episode number 11, entering our final week of this little series on this work, Hermeneutics of the Torah, where we've been working through a subsection in this introduction. So today's sentence is going to make a liar out of me. Well, but not really a liar, because anytime you make claims about language and syntax and things of this nature, there are always exceptions. But you may have heard me say on previous episodes that when you're reading a German sentence, the first thing you're going to encounter will either be the subject or it will be some sort of modifier or modifying phrase. And that is not the case here. What you actually have here, the sentence begins with a verb, which, if you're sort of new to German, will throw you off slightly, because the fact that it begins the sentence means it is capitalized, and so it looks like a noun, but it is in fact a verb, which you would have to be able to pick up from this morphology on the end here, and also from the fact that, generally speaking, when you see man in a sentence, it is always going to be the subject. And so if that's the case, then you're looking at this going, I need a verb, and sure enough, it turns out that the sentence begins with the verb. Why does the sentence begin with a verb? Well, this is one of the ways in German that you can form a conditional. There actually are other cases where sentences would begin with a verb. In the case of an imperative, for example, the sentence may begin with a verb. But in this case, it is because it is a conditional statement. And another clue to how that is a conditional statement in this sentence is that when you get down to the second clause in the sentence, you have this so, which is a very common way of fulfilling an if statement, where you say if something, then something else, and so is the German word often used, where we would say then in English. Anyway, so let's go ahead and start translating this sentence. Beyond the sort of uniqueness of the syntax there, as I've just pointed out, it's not super complicated. So if one combines this with the already, I'm going to say covered or discussed, the already covered question, this is one of those adjectival constructions where you kind of get a lot of modifiers, including a participle, jammed in between the specifier here and the noun that it goes with. And this one actually doesn't flow too badly if you just translate it as you go, the already discussed question. You can, I mean, that's awkward sounding in English, but it's a type of phrasing that isn't totally off the mark. We do say things similar to that sometimes when we're writing. But you might change it around and use some kind of relative phrase. For example, you could say if one combines this with the question that has already been covered or discussed or whatever. But in any case, the question, the already discussed question about or concerning the relationship of wisdom and Torah. Now, I just want to point out one other thing here. So this word here, angerissenen, is functioning as an adjective, as you can tell from the adjectival ending here. But with this ge prefix from this separable part here, I mean, you can sort of see this seems to be a verb that is a past participle, functioning adjectively, which is perfectly fine. The question, though, is what is the verb and how are you going to look it up? If you look up angerissen in the dictionary, you're not going to find it. That doesn't exist. What if you took out the participial form and tried looking up anrissen? If you did that, you also wouldn't find it, because this is one of those verbs where the vowel morphology has changed. Now, if you're really good with your German, you would see that morphology there, and you might guess that the second part of this verb is going to look like this. But if you didn't know that, and if you, maybe you even would try looking it up, you know, IE instead of EI or something like that, or any other number of sort of, you know, short vowels that might have been in there that turned into that I in the form that you're looking at. So you're trying to figure out, how am I going to find this? Well, the thing is, in German dictionaries, if you look up a participle that's not one of these separable ones, so if you actually just ignore the prefix for a minute on and just look up gerissen, you will find that in your dictionary, because very often those past participles are listed as adjectives. So if you were to look that up first, that's step one. That's not going to get you to a translation of this. And so you want to be careful, because don't just see, oh, here, look at that. Well, it must mean something similar, and move on. Because you'll notice here that gerissen is listed as an adjective. And it also tells you here, though, that it's a past participle of Reisen. Okay, so now you know that that's what you want to look up, except you want to look up anreisen, and you can see that if you tried to do something with this gerissen adjective, you would really be confused. Crafty or cunning, like what are you going to do with that in the context here? It doesn't make any sense. So you basically can just ignore that definition. All you really wanted to find here was, what is this verb? Okay, so now you know what the verb is. Now you can put the prefix on back on it, and you can look up anreisen. And you'll notice that this verb means something like to journey or to take a trip or something like that. And it's very often used in those kind of contexts where you're actually just going somewhere. However, it can also be used figuratively, which doesn't show here, but you would have to sort of just put it together, that there's a figurative way this must be being used in the present context, that you have journeyed through some discussion of a question. And so that's where I'm getting the translation of the already discussed or the already covered question. He's referring to kind of the trip through a question that he has covered earlier in the text that is, this book that he's writing. Okay, so if you combine this with the question about the relationship between wisdom and Torah, then and you have your verb here in second position, which means something like to receive or something like that, and then your subject. This is going to have another one of these long modifying phrases here. So if you take a look at this, this is a big, long sort of adjectival construction, you could call it. But it's got a prepositional phrase in there, and it's very confusing. When you encounter these things in German, they can be very daunting and freak you out. The key to always recognize is that all you have to do is find the noun that goes with the specifier or adjective that started the whole thing. It's usually a definite article, but sometimes you might find an adjective followed by a bunch more stuff like that, in which case you just want to put the noun with that adjective back with it. But here you're going to see that it's this, the references to Proverbs 1 to 9. So then the references to Proverbs 1 to 9 receive, or something like that. Now you can just figure out, okay, so what's this big modifying phrase saying about those references to Proverbs 1 to 9? The references in Proverbs 1 to 9 that already in the research have been discussed. So this is your participle. Very often these big phrases come with a participle. And so the already discussed in the research is a more wooden way of putting it. But the point is, you want to just say that this is references to Proverbs 1 to 9 that have already been discussed in the research. Those references take on or receive a different dimension.